Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, I was at a dinner party last weekend, and someone was telling this really incredible story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were really getting into it, embellishing the details, getting everyone laughing. But there was this one person at the table who just wasn't laughing.
Just kind of observing.
Exactly. They were just
Yeah.
watching. And right at the punchline, they leaned in and said, "Wait, you said you're in Chicago in 2018, but that restaurant didn't open until 2020. So the timeline is impossible."
Oh, wow. And the whole room just deflated.
Completely deflated. It was like the air went right out of the balloon. Everyone else was thinking, why does that even matter? It's just a funny story.
Right.
But to that one person, the humor didn't matter because the math didn't add up. And if the math doesn't add up, the story isn't real.
And that right there is the absolute perfect introduction to the personality archetype we are unpacking today.
It really is.
Because we all know someone exactly like this. The friend who spots the plot hole in the movie, or the colleague who finds that one single error in a 100-page contract.
We usually call them nitpicky or skeptical.
We do. But today, if you're listening, we're going to look at why they are actually the guardians of reality.
Which brings us to our topic. We are diving into the Max Energy ME80 personality system today.
Yes, the ME80.
And for those who might be new to it, this isn't just a horoscope or a simple traits test. It's a really robust framework that maps the internal engine of how people process energy and make decisions.
It's basically the operating system of the mind.
Exactly. And specifically, our mission today is to look at the profile known as the WAAU, though the report we're using gives it a much cooler name.
The forensic mind.
The forensic mind. I love that.
It's a very evocative title, isn't it? It immediately implies investigation, handling evidence, and reconstructing what actually happened.
So our goal for this deep dive is to completely unpack this operating system. We're going to break down their core identity, how their energy matrix works, their superpower, and of course the shadow side that comes with being a human lie detector.
It's going to be a fascinating journey. This type, the WAAU, really challenges a lot of our basic social norms.
They really do.
To understand them, you have to embrace the ME80 system's approach, which suggests that our behaviors aren't random at all. They're driven by a very specific internal logic. A unique way our internal battery is wired.
And for the forensic mind, that wiring is dedicated to one single thing: truth.
Precisely. Truth above all else.
Let's start with their identity and their core philosophy. The report has this defining declaration for them, which I wrote down. It says, tracing cracks through details, reconstructing hidden truths and motives.
It sounds like the tagline for a Sherlock Holmes movie.
It really does.
But for good reason. Tracing cracks is the operative phrase here. Most people, they look at a building and they see the beautiful architecture or the paint color.
The big picture.
Right. But the forensic mind looks at that exact same building and immediately sees the hairline fracture in the foundation.
Just drawn right to it.
Their eyes naturally gravitate to the flaw, not because they want to be critical or mean, but because the flaw is the most important piece of data.
Which leads perfectly into their philosophy on trust. This part I found really provocative because for most of us, myself included, trust is a feeling.
It's a vibe.
Totally a vibe. We grab a coffee, we laugh, I feel good around you, so I trust you.
It's chemical. It's oxytocin.
Yeah.
But for the forensic mind, trust is absolutely not a vibe. Trust is a calculation. It is a firm conclusion that you arrive at only after the data withstands severe scrutiny.
So you really can't just charm your way in with them.
You cannot charm them. In fact, charm usually triggers their suspicion.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, to them, trust isn't a gift they just hand out. It's a status that you have to earn. They view verification checking your facts, comparing your stories, not as being paranoid, but as a moral responsibility.
That makes total sense.
Oh, yeah.
They feel a duty to ensure that what is accepted as true is actually true.
Exactly. And that completely reframes your dinner party interrupter from earlier.
Right. They weren't trying to ruin the funny story. They were trying to stop the spread of misinformation.
Yes. They're trying to prevent the system, or the relationship, from suffering what the ME80 report calls repeated injury. Because if we build a relationship on a lie, eventually it collapses. And they just want to prevent that collapse.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of how they actually do this. The report talks about their control mechanism. It describes them as having an extremely strong logical coherence. But it also explicitly mentions they aren't just deep thinkers. They are very much doers.
That is a very common misconception. We tend to think of highly logical people as academics just sitting up in an ivory tower pondering the universe.
Right, disconnected from reality.
But the WAAU actually has extremely high execution efficiency. They don't just want to know the truth for the sake of it. They want to apply that truth to fix things in the real world.
But that action is always preceded by a very specific internal process.
Correct. And this is where we really pop the hood on the ME80 system.
Let's do it. The framework breaks the human engine down into 3 layers: IP, IQ, and EQ. It sounds a little technical, but it's crucial to understanding how they operate.
It is the core of the whole thing.
So let's start with IP. That's the inner value layer. What is the forensic mind setting here?
Their IP layer is set to risk perception activation.
Risk perception. Is that essentially the same thing as anxiety?
No, and that is a really important distinction to make. Anxiety is often just a vague, generalized fear of the unknown.
It's a bad feeling.
Right. But risk perception is a highly precise, active scan for known pitfalls. Think of it like a radar system on a ship. It is constantly sweeping the horizon, specifically looking for icebergs.
Oh, I see.
Before a forensic mind even considers looking for the opportunity or the fun in a situation, they look for the threat.
So while everyone else in the ship is taking pictures of the beautiful sunset, they are staring at the storm clouds forming behind them.
Precisely. That is their baseline state. They are literally wired to see the crack in the dam way before anyone else even notices the water level rising.
Okay, that makes sense. Moving to the second layer, IQ, which the system calls the emotional activation layer. This one tripped me up at first because usually we think of logic and emotion as complete opposites.
Right, you're either a cold robot or a passionate poet.
Exactly. But how does this work for the WAAU?
This is where this profile gets incredibly interesting. Their IQ setting is structure and principle judgment, which means their actual emotions are triggered by logic.
Wait, so logic actually is a feeling for them?
Think about it this way. When you walk into a room that has been perfectly organized, or you open a spreadsheet where every single formula links up beautifully, how does that make you feel?
Honestly, really satisfied, just calm.
Exactly. Now, for the forensic mind, that feeling of calm satisfaction is intensified by a factor of 10. Coherence gives them profound, deep emotional satisfaction.
Wow.
And conversely, when things are illogical or chaotic or people are contradicting themselves, it causes the WAAU genuine emotional distress. It actually hurts them.
So when that guy at the office gets visibly angry because the meeting agenda is vague and rambling, he's not just being difficult for the sake of it.
No. He's essentially in pain because of the incoherence. The lack of structure is triggering a negative emotional response.
That explains so much. Okay, let's look at the third layer, EQ, the decision calculation layer.
For the WAAU, this is set to her emotional detachment and understanding.
Emotional detached.
Yes. When it finally comes time to make the actual decision, the forensic mind has this amazing ability to perform emotional surgery. They can just cut the wire between their feelings and their decision-making process.
So if we put that all together, the IP layer scans for risk. The IQ layer judges the logical structure, and the EQ layer strips away the messy emotions to make the final, clear decision.
That is a formidable combination. It creates a person who can make very hard, necessary calls when everyone else in the room is panicking. They completely separate the raw data from the human drama.
So how does all this internal energy actually show up in the room? The report calls this the manifestation layer. Are they the loud ones taking charge of the meeting?
Not usually, no. The report describes their energy manifestation as inward. The key words here are carrying, absorbing, and integrating.
Absorbing. That sounds pretty intense.
It can be. Think of them almost like a black hole. And I don't mean that in a negative, destructive way, but just in terms of sheer gravity.
Drawing things in.
Exactly. They aren't projecting a bunch of loud energy out at you. They are quietly pulling information in. They're watching your body language. They're listening to the subtle shifts in your tone.
Gathering data points.
All the time. They are remembering what you said 5 minutes ago and comparing it to what you are saying right now. They are integrating all of these tiny data points into a massive, cohesive map of reality.
Which brings us to their inner characteristics. Because the report flat out calls them the human lie detector.
And this is their ultimate superpower. Because they are constantly absorbing everything, they naturally notice the causal structure of any narrative. If you tell them a story, they don't just hear the words, they see the blueprint.
And if there is a gap in that blueprint, like your timeline at the dinner party didn't match up.
A massive red light goes off in their head. They spot the glitch in the matrix immediately. They are incredibly sensitive to any hesitation in tone or any logical incoherence.
But here is where it seems to get a bit tricky for them socially. The report spends time talking about this concept of delayed judgment.
Right. Because to an outsider, a WAAU can sometimes seem slow or even indecisive. You ask them a direct question and there's just this long, heavy pause.
Yeah, and we live in a world of hot takes. We tend to reward the person who has an opinion immediately, right or wrong.
We absolutely do. But the forensic mind outright refuses to play that game. It is not indecision at all. The report calls it a profound reverence for factual truth.
Reverence, that's a strong word.
It is. They will not give you a verdict until they have reviewed absolutely all the evidence.
They are like a judge who refuses to sentence the suspect until every single witness has taken the stand.
That's a great analogy, and that level of patience is incredibly rare. It absolutely saves them from making hasty, stupid mistakes, but it can really annoy people who just want a quick, easy answer.
Now, we have to talk about the cost of running this kind of operating system, the shadow blind spots, because there's always a shadow side.
Always.
The report mentions something called the loop. What is that?
This is really the tragic side of the forensic mind. Because they have such an extraordinarily high sensitivity to errors and injustice, and because they verify everything so deeply, when they are eventually betrayed or even when they make a significant mistake themselves, they cannot just let it go.
They don't have a delete button in their brain.
They really don't. They get stuck in a replay loop. They will replay that conversation, that event, that betrayal over and over and over again, analyzing it frame by frame by frame.
What are they looking for?
They are looking for the exact moment the truth was broken. They need to understand the structural failure.
And the report mentions that their memory capacity actually contributes to making this worse.
It calls it exceptional detail memory capacity.
Wow.
For most of us, memories naturally fade over time. The edges get blurry, the details drop away, and that actually helps us forgive and move on.
Time heals all wounds, as they say.
Right. But for the forensic mind, the memory stays in perfect 4K resolution. They will remember the exact wording of a lie you told them 3 years ago.
That sounds like an incredibly heavy burden to carry around.
It is a huge burden. It leads to what the system calls the memory trap. They genuinely struggle to heal emotionally because the wound is kept constantly fresh by the perfect clarity of their memory.
And I imagine this leads directly into how they handle social relationships.
It absolutely does.
The report calls this section strong distance. And I feel like I've experienced this firsthand. You try to make simple small talk with a forensic mind, and it is literally like hitting a brick wall.
They have a physical, visceral distaste for surface pleasantries.
So no chatting about the weather.
Asking them about the local sports team or saying, nice weather we're having today, is actively painful for them.
Why is that, though? Is it an arrogance thing? Do they think they're just too smart for normal conversation?
Not at all. It has nothing to do with arrogance. It's because small talk lacks data. It lacks structural truth. To them, it's just empty filler. They crave what the report calls high-quality, deep dialogue.
Give me an example of that.
They want to know your core philosophy on life. They want to know your deepest fears or analyze the structural integrity of your 5-year career plan.
They skip the appetizer entirely and go straight for the steak.
Always. And this creates a very specific dynamic for their friends and romantic partners. The report describes their relationship style as reserved yet sharp.
Reserved yet sharp.
Yeah. If you are close to a forensic mind, you are going to feel two very distinct things: safety and pressure.
Well, the safety part makes sense. You know for a fact they won't lie to you.
Right. They are completely impartial, they are fiercely reliable, and if they tell you they have your back, it means they have systematically verified that they can actually hold you up.
But where does the pressure come from?
The pressure comes from the feeling of being truly seen. You cannot hide from a forensic mind. You can't fake a good mood. You can't fake knowing something you don't.
There's no fake it till you make it with them. They see the faking immediately.
Instantly. And that can be exhausting for people who are used to wearing a social mask. But for those who genuinely value authenticity, it is the most loyal, grounded relationship you will ever have.
Let's pivot to where this personality type really shines, which is the professional world. Because if I'm running a business, I feel like I absolutely need this person on my team. Just maybe not in every single role.
The report identifies them as the ultimate truth repair specialist.
Truth repair specialist.
Yes. That is their massive, undeniable business value. Look, in any company, things break. Systems fail, projects go over budget, and most people just apply a quick patch. They fix the surface symptoms so they can clock out and go home.
Right. Put some duct tape on it, pretend it's fine, and move on.
The forensic mind refuses to use duct tape. They care exclusively about the root cause. They are the ones who will ask why 5 times in a row until they find the actual, literal loose screw deep inside the machine that caused the entire collapse.
The report uses the phrase threading coherence for this.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is their professional superpower. They can take wildly fragmented information, a dozen random emails, obscure server logs, office hearsay, totally disparate data points, and they thread them all together into a single, undeniable picture of exactly what went wrong.
So practically speaking, what specific careers fit this WAAU profile? The report lists a few recommended fields.
Investigation and audit are incredibly natural fits.
That makes total sense.
Fraud investigation, compliance auditing, internal corporate oversight. Basically anywhere where the truth is deliberately hidden and needs to be methodically dug out.
You definitely want them catching the bad guys.
Absolutely. They also excel in legal risk control. You can hand a forensic mind a dense 50-page corporate contract, and they will effortlessly find the one tiny clause on page 42 that subtly contradicts the clause on page 3.
I seriously need one of those for my apartment lease agreements.
We all do. They are just incredible at risk modeling and legal compliance. They also thrive in deep research and data science, roles that basically require staring at massive amounts of raw data until the true pattern finally emerges.
And the last one listed was organizational retrospectives.
Which is so crucial.
Like the post-mortem meetings after a big launch.
Exactly. When a major project fails, you absolutely want a WAAU leading that review meeting.
Because they won't sugarcoat it.
No sugarcoating, and everyone in the room knows they aren't playing office politics. They aren't trying to blame the marketing team to save the engineering team. They're purely just revealing the mechanical, factual failure of the system so it never happens again.
It really seems like their ultimate role in society is to just be the steward of reality.
That is a really beautiful way to put it. In fact, the conclusion of the ME80 report says something very similar. It says, they guard the factual baseline of the world through calmness and patience.
Guarding the factual baseline. You know, if you think about it, we live in a world right now of deep fakes, political spin, endless misinformation, and alternative facts.
It's everywhere.
It feels like the forensic mind is more necessary right now than ever before in history.
It really is a heroic role, but sadly, it's often a very thankless one.
Why is that?
Well, they're the ones who reinforce the bridge so it stops it from collapsing. But nobody ever applauds the bridge that doesn't fall down.
Oh, that's so true. The disaster averted is invisible.
Exactly. But when the truth is finally restored, when a hidden injustice is exposed to the light, the forensic mind feels their entire existence is validated. They anchor all of us back to what is actually real.
And we desperately need that anchor. This has been such an illuminating look at the WAAU, the forensic mind. It really changes how I view those skeptical, detail-obsessed people in my own life.
They really aren't trying to be difficult.
No, they're just trying to be accurate.
And in their relentless accuracy, they actually offer us all a lot of protection.
So here's my final question for you if you're listening as we wrap up this deep dive. We spent a lot of time talking about how the forensic mind views trust, not as a warm feeling, but as a firm conclusion based on solid evidence.
Right.
In your own life, in your relationships, in your business, do you treat trust as a feeling that you just give away because it's easy and comfortable? Or is it a hard conclusion that must be earned through verification?
That is the ultimate question.
And which of those approaches actually serves you better in the long run? It's definitely something to think about. By the way, everything we unpack today comes directly from the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report.
Highly recommend checking it out.
If you want to deeply understand your own internal engine, or maybe figure out if you or maybe your partner is a forensic mind, you can find the full breakdown and the test at www.maxenergylife.com.
And you can also just search for Max Energy or Medenita Energy on Facebook.
Yeah.
There is a whole active community over there discussing these profiles and how they interact.
Definitely go check that out. It's a completely fascinating lens to view the world through. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure to explore the truth.
See you next time.